Queen Elizabeth II is dead, and I apologise unreservedly if this is how you are finding that out. The longest reigning British monarch, and the second longest reigning monarch of any sovereign state ever, trailing only Louis XIV of France, Elizabeth II was the Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms for some 70 years and 214 days. Naturally then, following her death at Balmoral Castle at the grand old age of 96 last week, all football had to be cancelled, right from the Premier League down to amateur and even children's fixtures. Obviously, seen as though anything else would have been deeply disrespectful. Or at least, that seems to be the received wisdom of the Premier League, the EFL, and the Football Association, who took that decision of their own accord, with the government offering no official guidance on whether or not games should be postponed. Now they find themselves in a spot of entirely predictable bother, with some games having to be called off this weekend due to police resources having been diverted to the funeral, and therefore not being available for football matches, meaning that some teams face consecutive weekends without any football during what is already the most congested football season of all time as a result of a Winter World Cup having been plonked right slap bang in the middle of it. Manchester United, for example, had both their game last weekend against Crystal Palace and now their game this weekend against Leeds United called off, both of which will be a nightmare to rearrange, as the Red Devils tried to contend with a Europa League campaign, a Winter World Cup, just like everyone else, and League Cup and FA Cup fixtures all still to come. Of course, football's governing bodies knew all of this, just as they knew that thousands of football fans had already paid for their travel, accommodation, and had booked time off work to go to games, that thousands more people depend upon those fixtures to make a living and to feed themselves and their families, and that almost all other sports were still going ahead. Yet, still they went ahead and did it with just a single day's notice. So what is it? Stupidity? Malevolence? Or just a country that is held hostage by the most malignant media ecosystem anywhere in the world? Some of you might be thinking to yourselves, oh come on now Alfie, what's done is done, maybe it was a bit daft, but it's not that big of a deal. Well, for a start, I do actually think that it is quite a big deal. People keep asking me about it in the comments and on social media, and there are so few dissenting voices on this issue, especially among people with any kind of a platform, which I am fortunate enough to have, that I did actually want to make one big beast of a video about football's response to the Queen's death, why football is treated differently to every other sport, and why, I regret to tell you, games getting cancelled or postponed almost certainly had nothing to do with mourning, respecting, or actually honouring the Queen. Though it comes quite far down the list of reasons why cancelling and postponing games was wholly stupid and wrong, I do want to give a quick word to the actual practicalities of what it means from a football perspective. I gave the example of Manchester United during the introduction, who have a particularly packed schedule as they look to contend with European football, meanwhile the other teams who will also be going at least 2 weekends without any Premier League football whatsoever, are Chelsea, Liverpool, Leeds United, Brighton and Hove Albion, and Crystal Palace. In the case of Brighton and Crystal Palace, their game had already been postponed this weekend before the Queen's death as a result of industrial action taken by rail workers, but obviously the blanket ban on football last weekend still means that it will be 2 consecutive missed game weeks for them both, rather than it just being 1. This, at a time when fixture congestion is one of the biggest concerns within the sport, and during a season which was already ludicrously overcongested as a result of the upcoming World Cup in Qatar, means that not only will those fixtures be difficult to rearrange, they will be squeezed into an extremely tightly packed schedule. That means less intensity and less quality in those games, and more fatigue and more injuries. Make no mistake, there will be footballers who get injured as a direct result of a postponement that only a tiny number of people within the world of football, whether that be players, managers, or fans, actually felt was appropriate. Even the staunchest of monarchists that I know, who are genuinely upset at the Queen's passing, are of the opinion that a better tribute to the Queen would have been to have had a minute's silence at all of the games, rather than postponing them entirely. More egregious than the scheduling issues and the near certainty that players will be injured, and that both club and World Cup campaigns could be decided off the back of those injuries, is the total disregard shown for the circumstances of supporters. We are used, or should be used, by this stage, to footballing authorities not giving a damn about fans, and particularly match-going fans. Fixtures are rearranged by Sky Sports, BT Sport, Amazon, and other broadcasters with absolutely no consideration to what it might mean for supporters hoping to attend those games. Hull City, for example, play away at Swansea City this weekend, and as a result of Sky Sports making it a 12:30 kickoff for television, coaches will have to set off from Hull at 5:30 in the morning to make the 10-hour round trip. That is bad, but at least fans typically, in those situations, receive fair warning and can make arrangements around that or decide not to attend accordingly. Sticking just with my club, Hull City, we were set to play away at Cardiff City last Saturday until the EFL announced the day before the game that all fixtures had been cancelled. The Hull City players and coaching staff were already in South Wales for the game at the time, as no doubt plenty of fans will have been as well, having forked out a small fortune on transport and accommodation. There will have been, quite literally, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of football fans who had already paid for their travel, accommodation, and had booked time off work last weekend, only to be left out of pocket to the tune of hundreds of pounds. At the absolute least, the Premier League, the EFL, and all other governing bodies that agreed to call fixtures off should have compensated supporters for every single penny that they had lost through no fault of their own. I genuinely struggle to see how anyone could think otherwise, even if they agree with the decision to postpone matches. I mean, look, the money even has the Queen's face on it. What could be a more fitting tribute than that? The Premier League in particular has a huge number of international fans, some of whom will have spent thousands of pounds on a potentially once-in-a-lifetime, or at least only once-in-a-year trip, only to find that all of their plans have been scuppered at the drop of a hat with only a day's notice because the Premier League was scared that Liverpool fans might not show enough deference towards the new king, who has been imposed upon them when asked to sing the national anthem. Let's be clear here, that is the primary reason why the Premier League decided to call the weekend's games off, kickstarting a domino effect that ended up with the FA deciding to cancel all amateur and even children's football. Children's football. Seriously? That's what she would have wanted, is it? For kids not to be able to kick a ball around their local park. Everyone still has to go into work, of course. You can mourn at work. You don't get a day off from paying your mortgage, rent, or bills. That goes without saying, but God forbid a group of 8-year-olds have a game of football, well, then apparently Liz would be turning in her coffin faster than one of those rotating doner kebab machines. Famously, she despised football and children, or something like that, I suppose. Don't forget, we just locked children up for the best part of 2 years as part of the government's pandemic response, and now we've decided to tell them that they can't kick a ball about and have a laugh with their friends because an extremely old lady died peacefully following a life of unparalleled privilege in the luxury of her own castle surrounded by loved ones at the age of 96. Don't get me wrong, the fact that the royals are absurdly rich and live life with hordes of servants waiting on them at every moment. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, supposedly has 4 valets just to take care of his clothes, and a servant to squeeze toothpaste out onto his toothbrush for him. I am not saying that any of that will compensate for the grief of losing a loved one. Obviously it doesn't, and I have every sympathy for anyone in that scenario. But this is not the fire at Grenfell that we are talking about here, after which, of course, no football was cancelled, no events were as far as I can recall, and years afterwards, many surviving victims still hadn't even been rehoused. Many people are mourning the Queen's death, of that there is no doubt, but I don't think that anyone could say that they are in genuine shock, as they might, about Princess Diana's death, for example, or the recent killing of Chris Kappa. Though people used to be taught that royals were from superior stock and a superior bloodline in order to justify their existence, and the idea that they were just innately superior to everyone else, they are still subject, I'm afraid, to the laws of biology, which means that it is inevitable that at some stage they will cease to exist. And by anyone's standards, 96 is a bloody good innings. I do wonder in how many households across Britain, upon hearing the news of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, people said to a loved one or family member, "I have got some awful news. The Queen has died." Only for them to respond, "Oh no, how awful. I suppose that'll mean that they are cancelling all of the under-11 football fixtures this weekend then." In all seriousness, what percentage of people, when they heard that the Queen had died, would have said that stopping kids from playing football all weekend would be an appropriate, proportionate, or respectful response? I am going with about 0.8%, all of whom were able to vote in the recent Conservative leadership election and think that Marcus Rashford should shut up about hungry kids and get back to playing football. This is a brilliant illustration of one of the many problems with having a country which is almost entirely controlled and at the behest of the print media industry, and has a print media industry which is run by the most vicious, vindictive, and utterly malignant band of barons, editors, and hacks anywhere at least in the Western Hemisphere. The Premier League is a business, more so than any other football league on the planet. It is, therefore, extremely carefully managed, innately risk-averse, and terrified of criticism. In almost any given circumstance, the Premier League will choose what it deems to be the path of least criticism and least controversy, whether it thinks that that decision is the right one or the wrong one, for purely commercial reasons. The Premier League know full well that if football fixtures went ahead during this same week that the Queen died, and not every minute's silence and national anthem was observed with the same level of devotion as would be exhibited by North Koreans mourning the passing of Kim Jong-un, or just, England cricket fans, the newspapers would turn it into a massive story, effectively using the Queen's coffin as a battering ram with which to attack them. In all likelihood, there would have been very little disruption to any minute's silence in the Premier League. Football crowds are relatively old and affluent these days, and therefore they are hardly the epicenter of the nation's republicanism or revolutionary spirit. Liverpool is the obvious exception where you might have seen some disruption, though even that was fairly muted for their Champions League tie with Ajax, but still the stakes were too high as far as the Premier League was concerned. That is why they postponed an entire weekend's worth of fixtures. Not out of respect for the Queen. How would that even be respectful? Just the idea that anyone might have any fun within the week of her dying. Clearly not. Otherwise, almost all other sports, including rugby and cricket, wouldn't have gone ahead. Football is unique, or very nearly unique at least, in that it is still too synonymous with working class communities, and the plebs might just not do as they're told. This is an enormous problem in Britain, where almost every institution, sporting or otherwise, is terrified of being on the receiving end of a media blitzkrieg for not conforming to the mandated levels of whatever the supposedly right act or set of emotions are in response to whatever the entirely manufactured outrage of the day that they have whipped up might be. Don't forget, this is a media ecosystem that has, in the last year alone, insisted that the largest LGBT charity in the country are actually massive homophobes, that the National Trust, which, for those of you who don't know, is a charity for heritage conservation, is actually run by Britain-hating communist revisionaries because they dared to mention the fact that slavery and empire were things that did happen, what with history being kind of their thing and all, and that Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and, just about every human rights organisation are actually despotic, bullying racists themselves because the British press said so, and therefore it is thus. Some people think that the influence of the media is overblown. Those people are wrong. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, has never been very popular. In fact, among royals, he has polled poorly for years. Just 42% of British people said that they liked Charles when they were last asked, which admittedly does make him more popular than his brother Andrew, but still less popular than the Queen, Prince Philip, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Zara Phillips. When asked whether Charles would make a good king, therefore, as the successor to the throne, the British public have consistently been ambivalent. As you can see here, in May 2022, 32% of people said yes, 32% said no, and 36% weren't sure. Just 4 months on, following a pedal-to-the-metal media onslaught, with non-stop royal puff pieces being beamed through every television and radio station, printed on every page of every newspaper, and plastered all over the internet, suddenly, despite Charles having done nothing during that time, or nothing of any significance at least, the percentage of people who now say yes to whether he will make a good king has skyrocketed to 63%. No is down to just 15%, and the don't know's 22%. In short, nothing is real, politics doesn't matter, and the media can convince the British public of quite literally anything within a matter of days. I've no doubt that some of you will be thinking, crikey Alfie, even for you this is a bit of a tangent to football matches getting postponed, but given that this is the exact reason why that decision was made, fear of the insatiable British press, not out of respect or because Premier League executives sincerely felt as though all football fans should stay at home mourning all weekend, makes it extremely relevant. Why else, do you suppose, would the Sheffield and District Fair Play League respond to a team in their league who, after their league game was cancelled because of the Queen's death, played the same team who they were scheduled to play in a friendly game instead because both teams wanted to play, by putting out a statement in which they described the team's decision to play the friendly as being disrespectful and despicable behaviour, adding that, quote, "There will be an investigation into this matter in conjunction with the Sheffield and Hallamshire County FA, and these two teams will be dealt with in the strongest possible terms." End quote. A worthwhile reminder at this point that the upstanding Prince Andrew was the president of the Football Association for 6 years, yet football's governing bodies have the nerve to call an amateur football club disrespectful and despicable for the heinous crime of... One second. Just let me check my notes here. Okay. Ah, yes. Playing a game of football. The bloody rapscallions. As the team in question, namely Sheffield International FC, pointed out, would it have been any less disrespectful, or despicable for that matter, for them to have played rugby instead? What is it, exactly, that is so offensive in light of the Queen's death about playing football more so than badminton or the long jump, for example? Of course, there was one football match that still went ahead in England this weekend, 2 in fact, and who do you think that might have been? That's right, good old Eton College, where many royals studied. The most expensive fee-paying school in Britain, who specialise in producing wretched prime ministers, still went ahead with their 2 fixtures, whilst children throughout the rest of the country did not. I won't bore you with a one rule for them tirade, but I suppose they were sure enough that no one at Eton would disrupt the minute's silence. Republicanism probably isn't rife within the halls of a school that cost £46,296 a year to attend, which is considerably more than the average UK household income. On that note, actually, it isn't just football fans who have been left out of pocket by the cancellation and postponement of matches throughout the football pyramid. Thousands of people also rely upon those fixtures to, at least in part, earn their living. Most of the ground staff at football matches, from the staff who work behind the bars to those working as stewards, are on temp and 0-hour contracts. A game getting called off means that they literally don't get paid, and you probably don't need me to tell you that most people who work at football stadiums on temp contracts didn't receive a £46,000 a year education, and many will depend upon that income to feed themselves and their families. They too, surely, ought to have been fully reimbursed for that loss of income, at a time when Britain is struggling with a brutal cost of living crisis and millions of people are forced to skip meals. This weekend, most Premier League fixtures are going ahead, but not still without significant plans put in place by the Premier League. According to reports, there will be a minute's silence and the national anthem played before all of the games, managers have been asked to wear suits, and fans will be asked to applaud on the 70th minute, presumably because not all games will reach a 96th minute. This is not what an organic outpouring of grief looks like. If there is one thing that football fans are quite good at, famously so, it is spontaneously breaking out into song, devising plans to do certain things at certain times, and letting their feelings be known from the terraces. If fans want to mourn or honour the Queen in any way that they see fit, or sing the national anthem, then they are perfectly capable of doing it themselves. By mandating and scheduling it, the obvious implication is that the Premier League aren't convinced that they would. Again, who is this actually for? Who is it supposed to appease? Preston North End, meanwhile, have issued one of their fans with a lifetime ban for tweeting them, asking if he would be ejected from the ground if he booed during the minute silence. A lifetime ban. In response to that, a Preston fan who also works at Deepdale as a steward pointed out that despite having reported multiple fans for hurling racist abuse during games, including the N-word and the P-word, none of them have ever resulted in bans. Yet a tweet asking about booing the minute silence for the Queen, not even actually booing it, it's worth reinforcing, is apparently enough to warrant a lifetime ban. There are a lot of points that I've made in this video because the last sort of 10 days on Normal Island have been just utterly unhinged, and football has been dragged into that storm. Of course, football matches getting cancelled pales in comparison to the stupidity and downright evil that is cancelling or postponing hospital appointments, funerals, and shutting food banks. But it was still deeply stupid, and whilst a lot of people, most people I think, implicitly know that it was ridiculous, whether they are monarchists or not, the media blitzkrieg and the idea that you can't be seen to be the person who disagrees with something that is supposed to be somehow respectful convinces most people to keep quiet. These are overused and cliched terms, hence why I am reluctant to use them, but this really is gaslighting and manufactured consent on a mass scale. And you need only talk to 99% of people outside of the UK who are free from our toxic press to realise how utterly ridiculous it all seems when you are not getting poisoned by that well. Well, that's my take on it at least. Maybe you disagree. I would genuinely like to hear from anyone who thinks that I'm wrong about this, but just tell me down below in the comments and I will end with this question since no one has yet been able to answer it for me. Why is it respectful, or at least acceptable, in light of the Queen's death, for England to play a game of cricket at the Oval in front of over 27,000 people, but not for a group of young boys or girls to play a game of football at the park? Maybe I'm missing something obvious. It has certainly happened in the past. Anyway, hopefully this video doesn't get me arrested. That is all from me for today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case, or at least enjoyed hearing a slightly different perspective. That's important sometimes. Like I say, hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, or your answer to that question, if you have one. I would genuinely be interested in that. And make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so. Cheers, and have a fabulous day.